Okay, so like, have you heard about this like mass exodus that's going on in the tech world? Companies are ditching VMware left and right, it seems like. And there's a book that like really dives deep into all the juicy details of it all.
Oh, yeah. What's the book called?
It's called VMware Exodus, A Practical Guide to Migration.
Hmm. The title alone makes it sound pretty dramatic, huh? Like a full-blown rebellion.
Yeah, it does, right?
Yeah.
And I gotta say, it had me intrigued right away.
So what is it about the book that caught your attention? Why all the drama?
Well, it really does feel like there's some big shift happening in the tech world.
You're talking about Broadcom's acquisition of VMware, right?
Yeah, exactly. It seems like ever since that happened, the whole landscape has kind of shifted overnight.
Yeah, you can definitely feel a change in the air.
This book does a really good job of laying out all the reasons why so many companies are feeling like they need to jump ship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. So, like, what are some of the main reasons? What's pushing companies away?
Well, one of the biggest complaints, and this is something the book talks about a lot, is the price hikes.
Price hikes. How bad are we talking?
Well, we're not talking about a small increase here.
Yeah.
The book gives examples of customers who are seeing renewal costs that are like 3 times, 5 times, even 10 times higher than what they were paying before.
Whoa, 10 times. That's insane. Imagine getting that invoice.
Yeah, ouch, right?
And like on top of that, those perpetual licenses that people were used to are gone too.
Right. So they're basically forcing everyone into a subscription model now.
See, that wouldn't be so bad if VMware was at least like innovating and offering cutting-edge solutions, you know?
Right.
But the book argues that that's not the case. There's this sense that VMware is kind of stagnating, just rehashing old tech while the rest of the industry is moving forward.
Yeah, and that's another big part of it, this feeling that VMware is falling behind.
So we've got skyrocketing costs and a feeling that VMware is not really keeping up with the times. But I feel like there's another layer to this story, right? Something beyond just the tech itself.
Yeah, you're right. There's this whole other aspect that I found really interesting, the community meltdown.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, VMware used to have this really vibrant community of IT professionals. They were passionate about the platform. They were always helping each other out, sharing knowledge.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a pretty active community.
But according to the book, that's all changed. Those once bustling forums have gone quiet, and a lot of IT pros are feeling ignored and undervalued.
Huh. It's like the heart and soul of the ecosystem is disappearing.
Yeah, and that's a big deal because in the tech world, community support could be so crucial, especially when you're dealing with complex systems.
I agree. It really makes you think, can a tech company thrive without a strong community behind it?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking about sticking with VMware, it's definitely something to consider.
So let's say you're an IT professional or you're part of a company and you've had enough with VMware. What are your options?
Well, the good news is this book, VMware Exodus, doesn't just complain about the problems. It also lays out some pretty compelling alternatives.
Okay, that's good to hear. So what are some of the options they present?
They actually cover a pretty wide range of alternatives. Everything from solutions that are really well suited for Windows-heavy environments to options that give you a ton of control and customization, and even the public cloud giants.
Interesting. So, like, where do they start? What's the first alternative they talk about?
Well, they start with Hyper-V, which is the Microsoft offering.
Okay, makes sense. So if your business is already deeply embedded in the Microsoft ecosystem, I guess that would be a logical choice.
Exactly. And it can be a really cost-effective solution, too, especially for companies that are already using a lot of Microsoft tools.
Oh, so?
Well, the licensing for Hyper-V is often bundled with Windows Server licenses. So you're essentially getting it for free.
Oh, wow. That's a good deal. So what about for companies that are looking for something that combines compute storage and networking all in one package?
Well, for those who want something like that, the book highlights Nutanix as a leading player in hyperconverged infrastructure.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of Nutanix. They seem to be doing pretty well these days.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they've really capitalized on this whole VMware dissatisfaction. They've made customer support a big focus, which, as we've discussed, is a major pain point for a lot of people who are leaving VMware.
Yeah, they saw a gap in the market and they went for it.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's talk about the folks who want maximum control and the ability to customize their cloud infrastructure to their heart's content.
Oh, yeah, the tinkerers. The ones who want to build their own cloud kingdom.
Exactly. For those who are comfortable getting their hands dirty, the book points to OpenStack.
OpenStack. Now, that's a powerful platform, but it's not for the faint of heart, is it?
You're telling me it requires some serious expertise. It's not something you just jump into without a solid understanding of the underlying technologies.
No kidding. But the book suggests that for companies that have the right technical know-how, OpenStack can be a game changer.
Okay, so we've talked about Hyper-V, Nutanix, and OpenStack.
Yeah.
But of course, no discussion of alternatives would be complete without mentioning the big guys, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud.
The public cloud giants.
Exactly. These behemoths offer incredible scalability, a global reach, and a mind-boggling array of services. It's like a whole different world.
And the book dives into each of them, highlighting their strengths and what makes them unique.
Right, like if your organization is all about data analytics and machine learning, Google Cloud might be the perfect fit.
And for companies that are deeply rooted in the Microsoft world, Azure offers seamless integration with the rest of their ecosystem.
It really comes down to understanding your own specific needs and priorities. What are you trying to achieve with your cloud infrastructure?
And that's where this book really shines. It helps you evaluate these alternatives based on factors like your business goals, your technical expertise, and of course your budget.
So we got a whole buffet of options here, but how do you actually choose which path to take?
Right. That's the million-dollar question.
Well, luckily, VMware Exodus gives you a framework for making this decision. They break it down into a few key considerations.
Like what?
First and foremost, your business needs. What problems are you trying to solve? What are your priorities? Cost savings, performance, security, agility? Once you have a clear understanding of your goals, you can start narrowing down the options.
Okay, that makes sense. So what else?
Then there's the question of technical expertise. How comfortable is your team with learning new platforms? Are you ready to dive into the complexities of OpenStack, or would a more user-friendly option like Nutanix be a better fit?
Right. You've got to consider the learning curve.
Exactly. And finally, there's the total cost of ownership. This isn't just about licensing fees. You need to factor in training support, potential hardware upgrades, and even the cost of downtime during the migration process.
So it's like planning a big move, right?
Yeah.
You have to think about all the costs involved, not just the price of the new house.
Exactly. And this book, VMware Exodus, helps you weigh all those costs and make an informed decision. It's like having a seasoned guide walking you through the entire process.
So what's next? Where do we go from here?
Well, so far we've talked about the why behind this whole exodus, the rising costs, the feeling that VMware is stagnating, and the community meltdown. We've also touched upon some of the most popular alternatives, but we've only scratched the surface. Now let's dive into the practical side of things. How do you actually migrate away from VMware? What are the steps involved? What are the potential pitfalls? What are the best practices? Get ready, because things are about to get really interesting.
So before you pack your bags and flee VMware, the book really stresses the importance of taking a good hard look at your current setup. It's like planning a road trip. You wouldn't just hit the gas without checking your fuel and your route and making sure you have a spare tire, right?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. You got to map things out before you just take off.
Exactly. And VMware Exodus actually gives you a practical checklist to help you assess your current VMware environment.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So what kind of things are on the checklist?
Well, it's all about understanding what you have, where the dependencies are, and what potential roadblocks you might encounter. It's like creating a blueprint of your IT infrastructure.
Okay, so you're not just blindly ripping things out and hoping for the best.
No. You need to analyze things like your workloads, your storage requirements, security policies, even those hidden dependencies that can really trip you up if you're not careful.
I can see how that would be important.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to move a critical database before the applications that rely on it are up and running in the new environment, right?
Exactly. That could be a recipe for disaster. And the book also reminds you to think about data, how much you're moving, what kind of storage you're using now, and what your performance needs are going to be in the new environment.
And let's not forget about security and compliance, especially with all the regulations out there these days.
Oh yeah, for sure. You have to make sure that whatever platform you choose aligns with your security needs and any industry regulations you have to adhere to. So yeah, this whole preparation phase is really about laying a solid foundation for a smooth migration.
Okay, so you've done your due diligence. You've got a clear picture of your current setup. Now it's time to actually plan your escape route, your migration strategy. What does the book have to say about that?
Well, it emphasizes that your strategy should be aligned with your overall business goals. Like, what are you hoping to achieve with this migration? Are you looking to cut costs, improve performance, boost security, or maybe gain more flexibility?
It's about answering the why behind this whole exodus, right? Why are you leaving VMware, and how will this move benefit your organization in the long run?
Exactly. Once you have a handle on those goals, you can start mapping them to specific migration objectives. For example, if cost reduction is your top priority, switching to an open source platform like OpenStack might be the way to go.
Or if scalability and global reach are what you need, a public cloud provider like AWS or Azure might be a better fit?
Precisely. And VMware Exodus is really good at guiding you through this process, connecting those big picture business goals to actual migration strategies and platform choices.
Sounds like this book is really living up to its name as a practical guide. Okay, so we've got our goals, we've got our strategy. Now what? Time to roll up our sleeves and start moving virtual machines.
Not so fast. The book actually recommends a more phased approach. You don't want to rip everything out at once and risk major disruptions. It's better to break down the process into manageable chunks.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where do you start?
They suggest starting with a pilot migration where you move a small set of non-critical workloads to the new environment first. It's a way to test the waters, get a feel for the new platform, and iron out any kinks before making the big move.
So it's like a test drive for your migration.
Exactly. And once that pilot phase is successful, you can gradually roll out the migration, moving more and more workloads over time.
Okay, so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket and potentially disrupting your entire operation.
Yeah.
What about monitoring and validation during this process?
Oh, the book is really big on that. You need to keep a close eye on things, make sure those workloads are performing as expected, and that your data is safe and sound. And you absolutely need a rollback plan just in case things go sideways.
So if something goes wrong, you can quickly revert back to your old VMware environment without causing a major meltdown.
Precisely. Think of it as an insurance policy for your migration. Okay, so let's talk about money. We all know that cost is a huge factor in any IT decision.
Yeah, nobody wants to get hit with unexpected expenses. Does the book address that?
Absolutely. It provides a really thorough analysis of the costs involved. And it's not just about licensing fees. They talk about the total cost of ownership, which includes things like hardware, software training support, and even the cost of downtime.
So it's about looking at the big picture, not just focusing on one line item.
Exactly. And they provide a framework for comparing the costs of different alternatives so you can make an informed decision. For instance, moving to a public cloud might have higher upfront costs, but could save you money in the long run.
It's all about finding the right balance for your organization's needs and budget. Okay, so we've covered the planning phase, but now I'm eager to hear about the actual execution. How do you actually get your workloads from VMware to these different platforms?
Well, this is where VMware Exodus really gets into the nitty-gritty. They provide step-by-step guides for each of the alternatives we've discussed, starting with Hyper-V.
Perfect. Let's start there. What are some of the challenges people might encounter when migrating to Hyper-V?
Well, they talk about potential compatibility issues, concerns about downtime, and even the learning curve for VMware admins who are used to a different way of doing things. They don't sugarcoat it. They give you a realistic view of what to expect.
So it's not just a simple drag and drop operation.
Not always, but they provide a really detailed migration plan walking you through every step from setting up your Hyper-V infrastructure to migrating your workloads and finally decommissioning your VMware environment.
Wow, it's like having a personal guide holding your hand through the entire process. What about tools and techniques? Do they recommend any specific tools?
Yeah, they offer specific recommendations for tools that can make the migration smoother and more efficient.
Okay, so Hyper-V is covered. Let's move on to Nutanix. This platform is supposed to be pretty user-friendly, but I imagine there's still some hurdles when it comes to migration.
You're right. They do highlight potential pitfalls like compatibility issues with certain applications, limitations of their migration tool, and the need to adjust networking and storage configurations. But they also provide a step-by-step migration plan and best practices for moving those workloads over to Nutanix AHV.
And once everything is moved over, it doesn't just stop there, right? What about optimizing the environment?
That's a crucial step that they emphasize. It's not enough to just get the workloads up and running. You need to make sure they're performing well and that your team is comfortable managing this new environment.
All right, let's talk OpenStack. This is the platform for the control freaks, the folks who want to build their cloud their way. But as we discussed, it's not exactly a walk in the park. What kind of guidance does the book offer for migrating to OpenStack?
They're upfront about the challenges, the complexity of setting up OpenStack, the potential compatibility issues, and the steeper learning curve. But for those who are up for the challenge, they lay out a comprehensive migration plan, guiding you through each step, from deploying OpenStack to migrating workloads and validating that everything is working as it should.
It sounds like having a seasoned OpenStack expert right there with you. What about automation? Does the book address that?
Absolutely. They stress the importance of automation, especially with OpenStack, which has a lot of moving parts. They recommend tools like Ansible or Terraform to help streamline the process and avoid manual errors.
Okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the public cloud. Migrating to a platform like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud is a pretty big undertaking. What kind of insights does the book offer on that front?
VMware Exodus really shines here. They provide insightful guides for migrating to each of those platforms, taking a very practical approach and highlighting the key considerations, challenges, and best practices for a successful migration.
I'm especially curious about AWS. What are some of the key things to keep in mind when migrating to AWS?
They talk about choosing the right EC2 instance types to match your workload needs, optimizing your storage configurations, and of course, leveraging automation to make things smoother. They also dive deep into security and compliance, which are crucial in the public cloud.
So they help you make sure your workloads are secure and that you're meeting all the relevant regulatory requirements.
Exactly. And when it comes to Azure and Google Cloud, they highlight platform-specific tools and services that can simplify a migration and ongoing management.
It sounds like they are really trying to equip readers with all the knowledge they need to make an informed decision. Okay, we've covered Hyper-V, Nutanix, OpenStack, and the public cloud giants. Now let's talk about Kubernetes. This is a whole different beast compared to traditional virtualization.
Absolutely. And the book acknowledges that transitioning to Kubernetes can be daunting, especially for teams that are used to managing VMs.
Yeah, it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges people might face when moving to Kubernetes?
They break down the complexities of containerizing applications, the learning curve of Kubernetes itself, and the different approaches you can take. But they also provide a step-by-step migration plan, helping you set up your Kubernetes cluster, containerize your applications, configure security and monitoring, and optimize your environment for performance and scalability.
It sounds like they're holding your hand through the entire process.
They really are. And they even offer guidance on choosing the right Kubernetes distribution, whether you go with managed service like Amazon EKS or set up your own cluster on-prem.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about minimizing downtime and risks during migration. No matter which platform you choose, you want this transition to be as smooth as possible for your users.
Absolutely. And the book provides a really valuable set of best practices for minimizing downtime, such as setting up a staging environment for testing, creating rollback plans, leveraging automation, and using techniques like blue-green deployments to reduce the impact.
Those all sound really helpful.
Yeah.
Anything else?
They also emphasize the importance of communication. Keep your stakeholders informed throughout the process so they know what to expect and can plan accordingly.
Yeah. You don't want to leave anyone in the dark and create unnecessary anxiety.
Yeah.
All right, so you've successfully migrated your workloads to the new environment. Champagne pops, everyone's happy, but the journey doesn't end there, right?
Not at all. Now it's time to optimize that new environment for performance security and scalability.
So what are some tips the book offers for post-migration fine-tuning?
Well, they recommend leveraging platform-native tools for monitoring security and optimization. For example, they mention tools like Prometheus and Grafana for monitoring Kubernetes clusters, Falco for security monitoring, and AWS CloudWatch for cloud environments. They also stress the importance of automation using infrastructure as code to manage configurations, setting up self-healing mechanisms, and creating automated monitoring and alerting.
Sounds like they're really big on making your new environment as efficient and resilient as possible.
Exactly, and they don't stop there. They dive into continuous improvement strategies, advocating for ongoing monitoring, feedback gathering, and making adjustments as needed.
So it's not just a set it and forget it situation. You need to stay proactive and keep refining things.
Absolutely. They talk about establishing feedback loops, fostering a culture of cost optimization, and continually refining your security posture.
So it's about constantly evolving and adapting your IT infrastructure to meet your changing needs. This book really does sound like a goldmine of information. We've covered a lot of ground here, from evaluating your VMware environment to migrating those workloads and fine-tuning your new platform. But I have a feeling VMware Exodus doesn't just leave you there. What do they have to say about the bigger picture, the future of IT?
Yeah, you're right. They definitely don't just leave you there. VMware Exodus takes it a step further and tries to paint a picture of what the future of IT might look like.
Interesting. So what's their take on the future? What do they see happening?
Well, they argue that the future is all about agility, flexibility, and embracing change. That makes sense. So it's like, what does that look like in practice?
Well, they talk about moving away from relying on a single vendor, like we've been discussing with VMware, and instead embracing a more diverse approach.
So instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, you're spreading them out across multiple baskets.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
By using a mix of on-premises solutions, public cloud providers, and open source technologies, you can create an IT infrastructure that is really tailored to your specific needs and can adapt to the ever-changing demands of the business world.
I like that approach. It's all about having options and being able to pivot quickly.
Right. And speaking of open source, the book seems to be a big advocate for it.
Yeah, they are. They argue that open source isn't just about saving money, it's about fostering innovation collaboration and avoiding vendor lock-in.
So it's about having the freedom to choose your own adventure, right? You're not
Yeah.
tied to one specific vendor's roadmap or pricing whims.
Exactly. And they highlight how open source really fosters a community-driven approach to IT. You can tap into a vast network of experts and resources, share knowledge, and even customize and extend those open source solutions to fit your unique requirements.
It's like the difference between buying a pre-built house and designing and building your own from scratch.
Yeah.
You have so much more control and flexibility.
I like that analogy. It really captures the essence of open source. What about other future trends? Do they touch upon things like edge computing and serverless architectures?
Oh, yeah, they do. They believe those technologies are going to be major players in supporting the next wave of applications and services.
Edge computing and serverless. So it's all about bringing computation and data processing closer to the user, which means faster response times and opens up all sorts of new possibilities for real-time applications and IoT devices.
Exactly. And they challenge IT leaders to start thinking about how to incorporate these emerging technologies into their long-term strategies.
Right.
They don't necessarily provide all the answers, but they definitely get you thinking about the bigger picture and what the future might hold.
Sounds like this book is a real eye-opener.
It really is.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but I think the biggest takeaway from VMware Exodus is that the IT landscape is changing rapidly. Organizations that cling to the old ways of doing things are going to get left behind. It's time to embrace new approaches, new technologies, and a new mindset.
And this book is like a roadmap for navigating that transition. From evaluating your options and planning your escape route to optimizing your new environment and continuously improving. It's an invaluable resource for anyone looking to modernize their IT infrastructure and stay ahead of the curve.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh,
So if you're feeling that VMware vibe fading and you're ready to explore your options, I highly recommend checking out VMware Exodus, a practical guide to migration.
it might just be the push you need to break free from the old ways and embrace the future of IT.
Well, that's a wrap for today's deep dive into the world of VMware alternatives and migration. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.